Hey everybody, this is Stitch 1993 here. Welcome back. Today we're doing another list, and today I'd like to talk about something that is very nostalgic for me. So of course I'm a Christian, and throughout my upbringing I watched a lot of children's shows aimed at Christian or aimed at teaching Christian values and Christian stories. And some were better than others. Some have definitely aged better than others in one way, shape, or form. And I felt I just want to kind of talk about the ones that I felt were the best and the worst out of all of them. So we're going to do kind of an interesting type of list today. So we're going to do the 15 best Christian kid shows. But before that, I'm going to do the top 5 worst. Now, this is just my personal opinion. You may have different opinions on these shows based off how you were raised, which ones you were introduced first, and at what age you were introduced to them. So some of them I may find are good or bad. You may find opposite. And just let me know down in the comments which ones you agree or disagree with, and if there's any that I didn't mention, because there was so many. These are just the ones that I could remember and recall, and even some I still own DVDs and VHSs of and still go back and watch every now and then. So we're going to start off with the top 5 worst ones with number 5, McGee and Me. Now, McGee and Me does have an interesting history to it, being one of the first well-received Christian children's television shows, premiering in 1989. It kind of was the beginning of the boom of all these other shows that would come in after it. So in that part, I do have to, tip my hat to that show, because without that show, we probably wouldn't get any of these other shows on the list. And you can take that as a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how your views are. But even when I was watching it back in the 90s and early 2000s, man, was this a boring show. I'm sorry. I see the VHS, I see a bit, animated character. I'm like, oh, cool, cartoon, where most of it is live action, and you're following this kid who's a cartoonist in Indiana, and yeah, it's like the kids learning a lesson, kind of one of those, after school special kind of things, or like early Nickelodeon type of storylines. And every now and then you'd have kind of like the Lizzie McGuire type of thing with the little cartoon character, which would be McGee, and he would kind of be going through the same thing and be kind of like the little, sometimes you'd be like the little angel or little devil on the kid's shoulder there, and there'd be sections where it'd just be a animated story using the McGee character, but it just dragged. And I remember only watching maybe a handful of the VHSs growing up and just could not get into it. And looking back now, it's definitely a product of its time in regards to pacing and stories, structure, and script. Number 4, Gerber. No, not Gerber, as in the baby formula company, Gerbert. This is a puppet show that started in 1988. And I guess it's not really considered I guess it is considered a Christian show, but depending on when you watched it or where you watched it, some of the parts could have been edited out to where it's just a regular show. So unless you actually sought out most of the VHSs, you wouldn't really know it was a Christian show. And it's really not, it's even more boring than McGee and Me, because it's just this little, very cutesy, very schmaltzy puppet called Gerber singing, Sunday school songs or just kind of nursery rhyme songs in the most slowest, schmaltziest way possible. It really never held my attention, which is saying something for a person that loves puppet shows. And for almost anything else, if you just told me there's puppets in it, I would watch it. I'd do that when I was 3, 10, and now. Just like, oh, it's got puppets in it, I'm at least going to give it a shot. And man, I remember barely getting through the one and only VHS I rented growing up because, wow, like, yeah, I like some of the songs, but I'm like, even at that time, I was like, these are songs I sing in church or sing at, Awanas. It's nothing new, nothing I haven't already been introduced to and haven't been introduced to in a better way. And it's not really telling me a story, really. It's just going from one song to the next, almost karaoke style or sing along style, which, if you're into that, check it out. But there's better, better sing along versions, better, everything. So, yeah, it's just very slow and very boring to me. Number 3, JJ the Jet Plane. Yeah, that's right. This is a Christian show. And you may not know that at first because just like Gerber, this show did get edited and re-releases to kind of cut out the Christian part of it. It's like it's barely a Christian show where it's like it only have like one or two scenes at like the middle or the end where we kind of talk about a verse or something like that. But for the most part, it's just your regular creepy animated CGI faced airplanes. And whereas other CGI shows have aged much better, this one did not age well at all. And really the only interesting thing is some of the voice cast. So you got people that voiced, Jimmy Neutron and Spider-Man and a whole bunch of other characters in this really rough looking show. Number 2, Salty the Singing Songbook. I'm just going to show a picture of what Salty looks like. That gave me nightmares when I was a kid. And that's why it's on the list. I don't care how into it you are as trying to reach out to kids and teach them about the Bible, but good Lord, please don't make a nightmare-looking creature like that as the main character, cause that's just creepy, and that's why it's on the list. It is just a bunch of praise songs, which again, just like Gerber, done much better in different forms. We Sing is probably the best version of a lot of the Christian praise songs. And Blue Man Group Ronald McDonald looks creepy as ever then and now. Number 1 on the worst Christian shows is Bible Man. So this came out during a time when superhero movies were kind of popular. So we already had the Tim Burton movies, the Tim Burton Batman movies, and I believe the Blade movies, but Spider-Man was the live action Spider-Man movies were not yet a thing. So this was definitely heavily influenced by the Tim Burton and more so the Schumacher Batman films. But it instead of he's based on a bat, his character is based off of the verses from Ephesians 6, chapter 6, verses 10 through 18, which talks about the armor of God. And so there's, the shield of faith, helmet of salvation, breastplate of righteousness, the belt of truth, and the sword of the Spirit, which is, of course, the Bible, the Word of God. However, in that, verses, that's all spiritual. That's not a real thing. That's not something you go out to your store and you buy. That's just, try to like, hey, read the Word of God, and live it. And this is how you can, gird your loins and, be more ready for the world around you and temptations that are out there. However, Bible Man took it literally, so he does have an actual sword, which is a lightsaber, an actual shield, actual helmet, and it just came off as really goofy. And for somebody that had already learned about those verses, I felt like their heart was not in the right place when making this show. I felt like they really just wanted to jump on the bandwagon that is superheroes, but make it Christian. And a lot of the stories just didn't seem to make sense, and the villains didn't make sense. So it was just a really weird show. I remember watching it, but I never remember really enjoying watching it. Just kind of, it was it was something to watch. It was something we were allowed to watch growing up. And as I said, you guys may have different opinions on these shows. And I'm sorry if I'm kind of stepping on some of your favorites, but this is just my opinions as somebody that grew up with all these shows. But enough with the worst, so now let's move on to the best. And we're doing 15 of these. Number 15. The Book of Virtues, a treasury of great moral stories. So technically this one is not a Christian show, but however it does, some of the stories, some of the books of virtue are stories from the Bible that teach about, compassion, self-discipline, and such like that. It was one of the more well-known shows, and yeah, you'd have stories from classic literature and fairy tales, but then you'd also have stories like The Good Samaritan, Esther, Daniel, and stories like that taught, a good life lesson, good, virtuous lesson. Great animated, great voice acted. It came on PBS in the 90s through 2000s. Definitely recommend checking that one out. Number 14. The Duan Pals Show. It is basically Barney, but Christian. And instead of a giant dinosaur, you've got an alien and a robot. And for somebody growing up that, grew up with Barney and was really just into puppets in general, and then you got a show that's just like Barney, has puppets, but they're aliens and robots, and it's Christian on top of that, well, then for a 5-year-old, you've just checked off everything on my list of a show I could possibly love and enjoy. Yeah, if you're an adult and you've never watched this show, probably not one you're really going to get into, because it is very, very talked down to, not talking down, but definitely dumbed down. Definitely a very early childhood development show. If you don't like Barney, you're probably not going to like Duan Pals. But if you did enjoy Barney, or you do like that type of show, definitely recommend checking it out, because it was just a really cool show. It's another one of those where it's like, it's technically Christian, but it's not, depending on how you watched it. So there was like some episodes that are definitely more Christian than others, but then of course it was also on PBS and ETV, so it would be edited to not have those portions in there. Number 13. Wiser Family Puppets. So this was a straight to VHS, strictly in probably only the Christian stores. I don't remember seeing this anywhere else growing up. A puppet show about, teaching different life lessons based off Bible stories, infused with a lot of songs, some hymns and some like praise songs, but a lot of at least from what I can tell, a lot of original songs that they made strictly for these VHSs. And there was 2 types of VHSs. So there was the Wiser Family Puppet VHSs, but then you had the animated Bible stories, which were fairly limited animation Bible stories. Throw a dart, and if you remember the story of the Bible, it's probably been one of those movies. But what's very interesting about these was the puppets. You're watching clips from the show now. These were pretty much just puppets you could buy at a store at the time. And they still make these, of course they're updated now, but you can still go online and just look up, ministry puppets, and they still sell these type of puppets. These were not, as far as I'm aware, these were not puppets for the most part made for this show. These were just ones, I guess, somebody scrounged up enough money, had a script, had a VHS camera or whatever, had some editing software, and had some puppets that they bought at probably your local Lighthouse store or Life store. Comment down in the comments if you remember those stores. But it was really charming. Felt very homemade, but in a good way, in a non-creepy way, just in a very, you could definitely feel like they had their heart in this, and they really just wanted to tell, use these puppets to share the ministry of the Lord. And I fell in love with these VHSs, and I still go back and watch them today. They've aged pretty well for the most part. There's 1 or 2 songs that are kind of a little off key, but that's because like kids are singing them, so it's like, well, kids aren't really gonna notice. I mean, maybe, but it's not like the end of the world or anything. But definitely want to check out number 12, The Donut Man. This was another one where it was just, mostly a live action cast with one or two puppets telling Christian stories. And the theme, the gimmick was there was a little donut puppet, and he would come out of his little donut box all the time, and he'd probably be the one that would ask the questions about, or whatever the lesson of the day was. He was the one that was being taught. And just one of the more interesting puppets I ever came across. Like, this was like Muppet level type of look and design wise for this little guy, and I don't remember anything about these videos except for the donut. But hey, it was a really good puppet, really great puppetry, really interesting puppet, and definitely want to check out just for the puppet. Number 11, What's in the Bible? So this is most recent, or I guess semi most recent show that's not a VeggieTales show by Phil Vischer, who is one of the creators of the VeggieTales series and the main creator behind it. For a while, he was not doing VeggieTales stuff. So while he wasn't doing that, he had his own production company, and they did What's in the Bible, which kind of has a lot of the same type of humor as VeggieTales, but instead of CGI, it was done through puppets. Almost kind of like in a skit type of form, something like All That or Wienerville type of style, but of course Christian, as all his shows were. And definitely one of the more interesting ones. Now, I didn't really grow up with this one. This one came out in 2010, so by then I was in high school, and I really didn't even know about it outside of like every time I would go to the local Christian store, like, which is the one I know is Olive Tree. They'd have one of these playing with. So if you enjoy VeggieTales, if you enjoy 3 to 1 Penguins, you're probably going to like What's in the Bible. So definitely go and check it out. Number 10, Puie Island. Outside of being one of the weirdest names for a puppet show, this is actually a really decent show. Top-notch puppetry, both in design and performance. And outside of like just some verses, I guess you really, I guess you could say, you could, pass this off as non-Christian, but it is teaching biblical lessons, so it is Christian. But it's about this girl that gets stranded on Puie Island, and she meets a bunch of other interesting creatures, and they all try to just, live life. And I believe she's trying to get off the island, but eventually she just kind of, says, hey, I'll just kind of stay here. There is a villain that is a snake. He's really cool. I really got into the show because there is a robot, and you put puppet and robot, and you've caught my attention. And this is just one of those that I watched over and over again. I would record episodes on a DVR and put them on a VHS and just keep them. There's like one DVD, I believe, that includes all the episodes out there. I think it's out of print, so it might be a bit expensive, but definitely check this one out just for the puppetry alone, honestly. Number 9, DAV and Goliath. I don't know how much information or how little information I need to go into this one, so I'm just going to pretend nobody's ever heard of this show before. So if you did grow up with this show, I'm sorry if I'm just going to be telling information you already know. But DAV and Goliath, released in 1961, is a stop-motion animation show that was produced by the United Lutheran Church and created by Clokey Productions, who was also the creator of Gumby. So Art Clokey, with the Gumby fame, was asked by the Lutheran Church to make a Christian television show. And he did, and it lasted for years and years and years, from the 1960s all through the 70s and into the 80s, and then reruns in the 90s. And they even made a new episode in 2004. So it has a long timeline. And basically it is about a boy named Davy and his dog named Goliath. basically just learning life lessons. And if it looks familiar, that's because this is the show that Moral Oral is riffing on. DAV and Goliath, honestly, is one of the shows that has aged the best, even in 1960s, because, some of the topics they talk about, even back then, are, sadly, for one reason or another, still hot topics today, because sometimes they didn't always talk about, just Christian values, but moral values. Because of course Art Clokey, I don't believe he was ever really Christian, but he did have he was spiritual, so he did try to put in both DAV and Goliath and Gumby spiritual life lessons. Quite a few of them were about the environment, so there are, even in DAV and Goliath, there are some environmentalist episodes that you could put it on today and it still would ring true. And of course, all the Christian episodes, I feel like they don't really hammer it over your head. It's just kind of a way of life. And, sometimes the Davy would take the story or take the verse out of context and not get into trouble or do something or he's a kid. He's gonna, let his imagination run wild. And his mom or dad or grandparents or whoever would have to rein it back in. And it's a great show, and I highly recommend, if out of all these shows, if you check out just one show out of this entire list, this is the one to check out. Number 8, Hermi and Friends, made by Max Lucado, based on the books of the same name. This is a story about some garden creatures, a caterpillar, worms, ladybugs, and so on, and with Christian value stories being taught here. The very interesting thing about this was one of the only shows that had, I guess not as, at the time they weren't, as big as they were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but it was one of the shows I remember thinking, wow, they got some big names to voice these characters, because Hermi is voiced by Tim Conway, and his friend Wormy, which is a cream-looking caterpillar, is voiced by Don Knotts. And I was just thinking, wow, that's really interesting. They got those two people to voice the main characters of the show. Like, these aren't even just like guest stars. No, these were the main characters for this show. So they were in pretty much every episode between 2002 through 2010, and with Don Knotts 2006 when he passed away, unfortunately. And it's definitely one of the better looking CGI animated shows. Of course, by this time, they did get pretty well with animating. So it is still going to look a little rough, but not as bad as some shows that were doing CGI around this time. And it's just a nice calming show. If anything, I would probably have to compare it to Miss Spider and Friends, because it kind of has the same look. Although, honestly, I think this looks a bit better than Miss Spider and Friends, if not just a little less creepy at least. Number 7. Superbook. I don't know if this came from if the kid was referencing this, but this clip here always reminded me of this show. Man, I've been wanting to use that joke for forever. It is an anime show based on Bible characters, and what would happen is these two kids would jump into the Bible with the help of a robotic friend and kind of live through the story of the Bible. It was always very cool just because at this time, especially, it was made in the 80s, but was still being played in reruns even throughout the 90s. It was just it was one of the first anime shows I was ever introduced to. Before Pokemon, this is how I found out about anime. If you're into anime, check this one out. It did get a sequel, or not even, I guess it got a sequel and a remake where they kind of went away from the art style and it was CGI. I haven't checked that one out, so I don't know what the quality is like or if it's just kind of a remake of the original show. But definitely in regards to the original show, check it out. Number 6, Quigleys Village. So I don't know about all you guys, but at least for me, when they rolled the TV out in Sunday school, oh, you knew you were going to be watching either Quigleys Village or VeggieTales. And honestly, at the time, I preferred Quigleys Village. Why? 'Cause puppets. And yeah, it's just puppets reenacting stories from the Bible. They're all animals. That's about it. They all have different, it's the night, they all are kind of 90s-esque type of characterizations there. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that one. It's just a really fun show to watch, really colorful, and, yeah, it's a fun show. Number 5, Adventures in Odyssey. Man, this one is one of the ones that was just kind of set the bar pretty high in regards to Christian shows and animated shows in general. Just because I feel like it had a much higher budget in animation than a lot of these shows did. For the time, it felt like I was watching like a Disney or Don Bluth animated television show. It was about this family that would, it would be just kind of these blown out of proportion episodes. Like, I'm talking adventures in space, adventures with big robots, blimps and all these cool, stuff you'd see in Saturday morning cartoons, but for Christians. And I mean, you don't have to be a Christian to enjoy the show. You don't have to be a Christian or, into religion at all to enjoy any of these shows, in my opinion. But this was one I was just like, wow, this was made, for the Christian audience in mind, but with the budget. And it was great, and it got really popular, so much that for those who grew up in the 90s in Vacation Bible School, aka VBS, who here remembers being taught about the armor of God with the Adventures in Odyssey cast, with the song of Bonnie Over the Ocean played, but with the lyrics of Put on the Armor of God? Tell me in the comments if you did, because that's how I remember that song. And yeah, if you just want to really watch a great 80s through 2000s animated show with moral values, Christian values, definitely check this one out. Number 4, Testament, the Bible in animation. Now, I've already done a whole other YouTube video about this show, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it, but I will say it is probably one of the most beautifully stop motion shows ever created, and it definitely goes over a lot more of the stories you don't normally see played out in a lot of these other shows. So stuff like Ruth and David and Saul and Elijah, and each one of them is they're all not all stop motion, some are animated, but each is done beautifully, and the animated ones are done almost each their own style. And yeah, well, again, check out my What Was Testament show episode to get more information about this show. Number 3, Mr. Henry's Wild and Wacky World. So this is kind of basically Pee-wee's Playhouse, but for Christians, or for, with a Christian curriculum in mind. Or if you grew up on PBS and UTV, Pappyland, but with Christian morals and stuff. So yeah, it's about this guy called Mr. Henry, who's an inventor who learns about the Bible through stories and skits, but all throughout the house, just like Pee-wee's Playhouse, there's puppets in all sorts of shapes and forms. You got knights, you got creatures, you've got fish in an aquarium, just all type of zany, wacky looking things, and the energy the same as a Pee-wee's Playhouse or Pappyland, or on a lesser, kind of a scaled up Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood type of style of show. And it was just fun to watch just because I love Pee-wee's Playhouse, and this was kind of on that same level as far as energy and look was, and style and comedy. So definitely check that one out. Number 2, 3-2-1 Penguins, created by the same company as VeggieTales. It is about a brother and a sister, Jason, Michelle, Conrad, that have to live the summer with their grandmother. After Jason's video game console explodes, he feels like this is going to be the longest summer ever until he finds a little spaceship in the attic. And his sister finds these 4 little penguin toys. And one day as they're playing, he accidentally drops the ship, and the ship comes to life and transports him to the, I'm not even sure if it's just it's like a toy world, like Toy Story, or an alternate dimension, but the toys, the 4 penguins, come to life, the ship turns into a real ship, and they go to different planets, and each planet is about a different moral lesson. So you've got stuff like Trouble on Planet Wait Your Turn, the Amazing Carnival of Complaining, Moon Menace on Planet Tell a Lie. Yeah, it was just probably the most creative show in regards to look and creature designs. You got creatures like like talking vacuums, talking darts, aliens of all sorts. And yeah, it was just a great show. Great intro music. I remember when I got the first VHS, I probably just played the intro over and over again. Just replayed it, rewound it, played around it. It was such a cool, like, sci-fi type of show, and I was really into sci-fi shows. This came out in 2000 and lasted until 2003, and that is my peak sci-fi robots loving age right there, as I'm sure most kids, that's probably about the age to get into that type of thing. But yeah, Big Idea Entertainment really knocked it out of the park with this show. Apparently it did not do as well as they had hoped. So it did not last as long as VeggieTales did, unfortunately. But for the episodes that did come out, I think they're probably the best stuff the Big Idea Productions has made, except for, of course, number 1 being VeggieTales. All right, you knew going into the list this was going to be number 1. I mean, it is the bar set for Christian entertainment for kids. Even the early motto for these episodes was Sunday morning values, Saturday morning fun, and they really got that down, where it really did feel like a Saturday morning CGI animated cartoon, but with Christian morals, and it really did not feel like they were being hit over the head with it, in my opinion. Just, from somebody that grew up with a whole bunch of shows and could tell when they're really trying to preach at you, and other shows where it was just kind of they're just kind of a moral thing. Now, of course, at the end of every episode, you'd get the computer in Bob and Larry reading the verse of the day, a little slow, and that's kind of when me and my sister would kind of turn it off or rewind and start from the beginning. But yeah, and I've already done a top 10 episodes on this list, so you knew this was going to be on here. But yeah, that is the 5 worst and 15 best Christian children's shows, in my opinion. Again, let me know down in the comments, which ones did you grow up with? Which ones did you think were great? Which ones did you think were bad? As I said, you don't have to be Christian or even religious to really get into a lot of these shows, so definitely check them out just for curiosity's sake. And of course, like and subscribe for future videos. Until next time, thank you and have a good day.